Welcome to Season 3 of the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Last year, host Jorden Guth got a crash course in the fundamentals of hi-fi from enthusiasts, journalists, manufacturers, and music industry professionals alike. Those lessons will continue, but this year, Jorden will also get a history lesson from the legends who were there from the giddy-up and who made hi-fi what it is today. So with that out of the way, here's Jorden and this week's guest.
Hello and welcome to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Today we have the founder and CEO of Axiom Audio, Ian Colquhoun, back with us to talk about a new range of Axiom speakers that are getting released. And I just want to preface this that if you haven't listened to the previous episode where Ian and I kind of spoke about the history of Axiom, how they acquired Bryston, and the later acquisitions that they went through, really interesting content and a lot more involved and kind of going deeper about the company itself. In this episode, we brought Ian back on because there's a really cool new product range that's getting released. And I had some questions. I had some kind of curiosity about this. So I wanted to bring you back on, Ian, and kind of pick your brain about this new direction. So welcome. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back. It's great.
So what kind of sparked this conversation is we got a little a quick preview of a new product announcement, and it is the Performance44 line of speakers. And maybe I'll get you to start by first kind of saying why the name 44, and we'll kind of kick it off and go into what's interesting about these guys.
Well, the 44 comes from 44 years of doing this. So we decided to call it Performance44 series because it's really a return to the sort of roots of Axiom itself. In fact, in many ways, the roots of what the whole Canadian audio industry did with loudspeakers in the early 80s, which is to see if we could bring out a line designed strictly for performance. So if it doesn't affect the audio quality, we don't include it. And the idea is to try and come up with a real value proposition, which really is returning to where Axiom began, which is obviously we had all of the research facility of the NRC. And of course, we have those research facilities now in-house. And instead of, really just looking at it from the point of view of just, designing without necessarily keeping the cost in mind, we thought, well, let's return to the roots of this series and really put out something that the performance is just top notch and do what we can from an engineering point of view to keep the cost down. And there are a lot of things you can do.
And I think what kind of intrigued me about this is that it doesn't sound like this is just something that you came up with yesterday and you're able to release the following Monday or something like that. This sounds like there was a lot of work involved in your manufacturing facilities to actually make this possible.
Yes, we have been buying a lot of equipment over the last couple of years, and that's what actually makes this possible is we've added processes that we couldn't do in-house before, and we've added automation to our in-house operation. So It's not just a matter when you say, oh, well, we're going to engineer this and we're going to try and do it from a value proposition. It's not just a matter of what you buy in the way of parts. It's a matter of how you actually make them.
And what does that mean, like in terms of the cabinets, right? So like I think of speakers, one of the fundamental things is the cabinet material that it's made out of. So is that, does somebody still have to like cut the MDF or the HDF or whatever it is? Or is this automated? Like how does all of this stuff actually get formed?
Yes. And we've been cutting loudspeaker boxes for 44 years now. So other than going from a bunch of sort of pretty much, garage type hand tools and what was available, what we thought were great machines in the early 80s got all replaced with completely computerized CNC machines in the 90s. And that has continued since. So that part of it we already had. What we didn't have was a lamination line, which allows us to laminate these vinyls onto the MDF core. And vinyls these days are quite spectacular. I mean, they're almost impossible to tell from the real thing. What we needed was a way to be able to laminate them and do it very, very efficiently. So we purchased it's 64 feet long, and it's completely automated. So you can put a lift of wood in one end and it will create a lift of finished product out the other completely automatically. It's a pretty cool machine to see in operation. So we had to do that, and we had to work on baskets, because one of the things we wanted to do was go to a stamp basket as opposed to a die cast basket. And in order to get the performance out of a stamp basket to match the die cast, of course, that meant it had to be a very heavy stamp basket. So we invested in a bunch of tooling in order to be able to stamp out these heavy gauge baskets. And the other thing we did is we're injection molding the tweeter faceplate. We already had injection molders, so all we had to do there was make a tool. But that's sort of the core of it there. And the models themselves are not really changing. They're the same models that we had before. They're now just made with cost in mind and with all of our new equipment, our new automation, and that's really where the change is.
So when you're talking about the models being the same, could you get essentially the same, let's say, M80 speaker in the Performance44 line as opposed to the traditional line? And what would be the difference between the two of them when it comes to like materials, let's say?
Yeah, you can get exactly the same speakers. So the lineup of the M60 and M80, M100, they're still there. M2, M3, M5 in the bookshelf, that's all the same. The center channels are the same. The difference is that they're going to be vinyl instead of real wood. And they're going to have these new heavy gauge stamp baskets instead of die cast. And we will injection mold the tweeter faceplate as opposed to using a die cast one. And of course, real wood would still be available if somebody wanted to order it and just pay a premium for it. But the idea was, previously it was only available in real wood. So we didn't have that option to keep the cost down by just the material.
And when it comes to the sound characteristics, would those change? Like I'm assuming not between wood versus MDF.
No, because the wood is a veneer on MDF. So it's really just what you put on top of it.
And then when it comes to the baskets, whether it's die cast versus stamping, is there any considerations there that one would be better acoustically than the other, or are they essentially interchangeable as well?
They're interchangeable. I mean, if you use a proper gauge material on a stamp basket, it's just as good as a die cast basket.
That's very cool. And I think one of the catch lines here that I really resonated with was this idea of made in Canada, sold in China, which is a little bit of a play on what we typically hear and what we typically see, where companies will say, the most famous one being designed in California, made in China. So I like this idea that it's that the play on it. When you're talking about components, it sounds like you're making almost everything actually in Canada. Is there still parts that need to come from overseas or need to come from outside of yourselves?
Just really base materials at this juncture. I mean, we have our own metal shop. We've got our own wood shop. We now have our own laminating line. We make all our own drivers, including our own tweeters. We do that in-house right here in Canada. We're making all our crossovers here in Canada. We have machines to make the wires, put the wire ends on. We don't use it for loudspeakers, but we have SMT machines as well for making circuit boards for the amplifiers. So in the subwoofers, we're making all the amplifiers here, populating the circuit boards here. We're doing absolutely everything here. And there's an interesting stat I'd like to mention. We are a net exporter to China.
Okay, so that line was not just fun. It's accurate.
It's very real. Yeah. We actually sell more in China than we buy from China.
I mean, that's pretty cool. You don't hear that a lot from I'm going to say almost any company these days, especially based in North America.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was a great thing to cross that line. And of course, really what happened is that our sales in China kept going up and up year over year. And at some point, it's not like we bought a lot there anyway, but at some point it crossed over, and now we sell way more than we do buy there.
Now, do you think, and I'm kind of curious about this, do you think that the Chinese market actually shies away from stuff that's made in China, or do you think that they just really embrace what Axiom has to offer, and just the fact that it's made in Canada is just a kind of an aside? It's not really the highlight there.
Oh, I think it's a very big deal there. In fact, I know it's a very big deal there to have a foreign made product, something that comes from North America or Europe. It's got an aura to it that's just, I don't know. It's kind of a statement that, you know, you've purchased something that's been imported. And obviously there's a premium to that because the Chinese products are pretty cheap in China, but you cannot get the kind of engineering quality, certainly not in loudspeakers. And as far as I know, not in audio amplifiers or anything else for that matter that you can get out of North America or Europe. So technologically, we actually do have an advantage there.
And I'm wondering how much longer that advantage is going to last. Like, do you see some of these Chinese companies as kind of catching up in that respect? Or do you still think there's a fair bit of headway from the North American and the European companies in terms of what they have in terms of maybe knowledge capital and processes on the engineering side?
I think that currently it's probably still quite a ways off. I think that ultimately it's going to happen. I mean, costs in China and the standard of living in China has been rising for decades, and they're no longer the absolute low cost producer around the world. There are other countries now that are lower costs than they are. And as that starts to happen, as that trend starts to happen, then, you know, they will start to go after the same sort of technological. It becomes a competition in how good is your technology, opposed to a competition in how low is your price.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this happened with Japan. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, you know, all the crap came out of Japan. And as the yen got stronger and their standard of living went up through the 70s and 80s, it became a situation where the low-cost products did not come from Japan anymore. They had to compete on a technological basis, and they did. So, you know, when will that happen with China? I don't know. Will it ever happen? I don't even know that. But it's likely. Let's put it that way. Somewhere down the road. Not yet.
It's funny that you bring up Japan, because I seem to remember, I think it was my dad telling me about like old Honda cars way back in the day, like coming off the boat and basically already being broken and like just being terrible machines. And like, I couldn't fathom that. I'm a child of the 80s. Like, I grew up seeing Honda Civics in 93 be the same car that's driving 20 years later. Right. And it's they're just kind of known now for their quality and their engineering and all that stuff. But it's interesting to think that, Japan was in a similar boat.
Yeah, it is. You know, markets being what they are, if you happen to be the low cost producer, in other words, that means your labor rates are low, then you don't tend to try and compete necessarily on quality level, because all you have to do is have the lowest price. So it's very, very easy to compete on price if you're in that situation. And, you know, it's still the case for China. It's nowhere near as cheap as it was, but it's still pretty cheap. And you know, you do see it. You see you don't see textiles coming out of China really as much anymore. They tend to come from other places like Vietnam and things like that. So it's starting to happen, but it takes a while.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a quick little musical break. And when we get back, I have kind of a question on the timing and why now was the right time to release this model. So we will be right back. Welcome back. We are still here with Ian Colquhoun from Axiom Audio. Just before the break, we were talking about countries and their shifting manufacturing quality over a period of time. And that kind of had me thinking about why this particular product range from Axiom, why now was a good time to release it? Was it just the machinery finally being in-house and you're able to take advantage of that? Or is there trends that you're seeing in the audio industry that kind of have you saying now is the right time to release a product that can be performance driven, cost as low as possible?
That's a really good question, isn't it? Timing wise, I think the thinking about this started about 3 or 4 years ago anyway, at least. And it was just really a discussion I was having with James, and we had drifted into an area where I just felt that, there were things we could do from a value perspective that did not affect performance. And we had drifted away from that over the course of, 40 years, basically. And we're doing things that maybe if we thought about it, we could actually do the same performance, but for less money. So timing wise, I think we were ready also to make a big investment in the factory. So it was kind of like, okay, well, while we're doing this, can we actually go after this goal? Because it's kind of a goal that no one is going after. And I think maybe that just happens because it's kind of like, well, if you want to make it for an inexpensive price, you just get it made in China.
Yeah.
And that'll certainly give you an inexpensive price, but I'm not sure it's going to give you the kind of level of quality that, we're certainly, even with the performance line, not going to be at the kind of prices you can buy a speaker for China. That's not the sort of end goal of it all, because the end goal of it all was not to sacrifice performance in order to get the price.
Yeah.
That was the end goal of it all. So it's sort of like, well, can we take what we have right now and look at this and say, well, what machines can we buy and what things can we do from a tooling perspective to bring down the price and not affect the actual audio performance? So it's been a number of years in the making, and I think I think the timing is right. I think it's just a matter that, we have drifted, the whole industry perhaps has drifted along with us, or we drifted along with the industry into not thinking this way. But we should think this way, because not everybody has tens of thousands of dollars to spend on audio, but that doesn't mean they don't want good audio. They want great audio. They just need to have it in a budget that they can afford. So that was the thinking behind it. And frankly, I think it was kind of long overdue. Probably should have done it 12 years ago.
Well, I mean, and it's funny, like coming back to a car analogy, like I'm thinking of all the cars nowadays. And it's always fun. Don't get me wrong. It's always fun to look at, let's say, the cars that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, that's incredible, and on and on and on. But the vast majority of people will never be able to purchase those cars. And even the ones that do, you might be sacrificing on other areas to be able to afford them. The fact that you can have good quality components, good quality speakers at a more affordable price, I think that's a win for the industry as a whole. I don't know that all these speaker companies that are releasing flagship products that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, that might just be a statement piece, but their bread and butter might be the kind of lesser models that are still made in overseas factories that kind of get the cost down a little bit more reasonably. So
I think that's pretty accurate as well, right? There's only so many people who can spend 100,000 plus on a pair of speakers. Frankly, there's only so many people who can spend 10,000 plus on a pair of speakers.
Sure.
And the other thing that I think we really liked about it was the engineering challenge behind it. It's a different, you're still looking at the whole thing from an audio performance point of view. It's like, we can't sacrifice the audio performance, but from an engineering point of view, what can we do to maintain the performance and actually bring down the price? So it was an interesting engineering challenge as well, which turned into a whole pile of equipment buying challenges, getting those up and running and all of that. But yeah, it was actually a lot of fun doing it. And it has been going on for quite a few years. I mean, it's just, we're now at the point where we're ready to do it. And I think that it's something that a lot of people are going to really want.
And when you're thinking about the ideal customer, do you imagine that the folks that are really going to resonate with this being existing audiophiles or people that are already into hi-fi that are then able to kind of afford a system that they were kind of after but not able to afford previously? Or do you see this as kind of a way to kind of make hi-fi more affordable to people that have never been into hi-fi, because everything they hear or everything they see in terms of products might just look so out of touch in terms of price that now they're able to say, all right, these prices make it so that I can actually consider this?
Well, in sort of, let's put it that way. I think that most of the audience will be people who are into audio, because obviously if you're not into audio, if you're one of those people who don't think you can hear the difference between your phone and a pair of speakers, well, you're probably going down to the local Best Buy or Walmart and buying a pair of speakers for $99. And,
sure.
They probably sound a lot like your phone. So you're happy.
If nothing but consistently crap.
Oh yeah. Look, the consistency thing is a whole nother discussion, because that's sorely lacking in our industry, even in the high end stuff. But, yeah, I think that the difference may be we might be able to bring some sort of, people who are not necessarily into audio, because I have to imagine it's quite a barrier if someone, gets introduced because their friend is into audio and they have a great system and they're like, wow, this is really nice. I'd like to have this too. What does it cost? And they respond, well, the whole system's $40,000. Well, that person that person is sort of like, oh, okay. Well, maybe not.
Yeah. Maybe I'll put the kids through school instead.
Yes, exactly. But what if they come back and the number for the whole system is, I don't know, 5,000, 8,000, numbers like this.
Yeah. Well,
all of a sudden, this is something that they probably can actually entertain. It can actually fit into their budget, let's say. It may not be the $1,000 that they would have spent, but they know they're actually getting something for it, and it's going to be enjoyable for them. So we may be able to get some converts here into, the world of actual high-end audio, good audio performance, right?
And you kind of already mentioned it, but this idea of consistency, and I don't remember who exactly used this line on me, but I loved it. We're visiting a factory and they were like, people talk about handpicking drivers to match them and all this and all of that. And this individual said, well, we just make the drivers so consistent that you could pick up any two and throw them into the speaker and they'll be good. And I kind of like that.
I think that might have been me in our last podcast.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But and this is kind of going back to this idea of like consistency. Does having the manufacturing literally down the street from your house and all the different steps, does that mean that you have that level of control over what's coming out?
We do have that level of control, and we invested a lot of time, effort, and money in getting it. It's not easy to get, especially when you're talking about tweeters, but it can be done. So we did it through a lot of investment in tooling and sort of working backwards through the inconsistencies, you might say, and like, what is actually causing this inconsistency? And then we ended up buying a couple of machines that from a company called Listening, that allow you to take every single driver that we make and measure it and make sure that all of the specifications of each driver match the sort of golden one that was designed originally. So it can be done, and we're doing it, but I can tell you it's very rarely done in this industry, and it is certainly not done in those big factories in China. I mean, they make sure it works.
No.
Nobody is actually measuring that it falls within, say, a 1 decibel plus or minus range. We're doing that at the part level, at the crossover level, and then we do it again at the finished product level. So we know everything is the same, and that is rare. It's sadly rare in our business. Certainly the idea of matching drivers up, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. So you've got a driver that's out of spec. Now you're looking for another one that's out of spec the same amount.
to match. Yeah.
Now both your speakers are out of spec. So yes, but the only way to do it is by making the drivers in-house. You would never be able to get an outside driver manufacturer to get into that level of measuring and consistency, and they just wouldn't do it. It wouldn't make any sense for them.
And the other kind of curious thought that I have is, I know Axiom, I think it's 5-year warranties on most of your products.
Yes.
Somewhere around there. Does this performance line maintain that same warranty, or does it change on the performance line versus the other?
No, it remains the same.
So basically, from all intents and purposes, somebody buying a new performance speaker is going to be getting the same warranty, the same performance, the same everything, but at a lower cost because of some of these manufacturing process enhancements.
That's it.
All right. And I guess my kind of final question is, in terms of price points, you mentioned that all the speakers that Axiom currently makes are going to also have a Performance 44 variant of them in this lower cost option.
Yes. In fact, there won't, the only way that you would say get something that's, say you wanted a real wood cabinet is you would sort of custom order it.
Gotcha. So what would the price difference be now that the speakers are going to be in the Performance 44? I'm going to say like the manufacturing line. Is the price difference going to be noticeable? Let's say for an entry level speaker, an entry level tower.
Yeah. And of course, we're also introducing or reintroducing the Model M50, which is a floor standing model we had about 10 years ago or so. But we've kind of redesigned it and brought it back in the line, and it will retail in the US for $1,398 a pair. So okay. That's a pretty interesting price point for a floor standing speaker.
And then the next one up would be the M60.
Yeah, the M60, and it would be around $1,900 for a pair, and then we'd have the M80 at $2,300. So these
we're talking like $400 or $500 price drop, roughly.
Yes,
not bad. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting. I think if you look at it from a percentage point of view, it's sort of in the 20-25% range, and that's pretty significant.
I mean, I think it'll definitely entice more folks to kind of look at these products when they're comparing against something from, I don't know, the Best Buy or something like that.
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? Where you can get close enough that maybe somebody will get into, real audio and not go, well, geez, I can't really spend 50 times the money.
I can't.
They probably can spend 2 or 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In closing, in finishing this off, the first time that I had you on the podcast here, I asked you, what was the soundtrack to your life? What songs would you always listen to, and what songs would you kind of resonate with? For now, we've already had you on once, so let's change this up a little bit and say, for you, what would be the first song you'd want to listen to on a new set of Performance 44 towers?
Oh, God, there's a big question mark, isn't it? I don't know. There's too many. How's that? Just
everything. Too many. Well, I'll throw my recommendation in. I got a new car about a month ago, and every new car that I get, which is very seldom, but I always put on Golden Earring, Radar Love, as the first song that I play, and it's amazing. So I know you have a very nice convertible as well, so maybe that resonates with you, driving to Radar Love, and I would love to hear that on some Performance 44s in the future.
Yes. And, when it comes to what I use a lot for listen tests, it's actually the Bare Naked Ladies Gordon recording.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's really well done. And it was done at Le Studio. So it was actually mixed on Axiom loudspeakers.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And
that's really cool.
It's I listen to that album just when I'm relaxing and listening to music still as well, even though I've listened to it 1,000 times in double blind listen tests, along with a bunch of other things. But that one's always the starting point.
Oh, I love it. Well, that's a good one to kind of recommend to the audience, and we'll end on that high note. How about that?
All right. It sounds great. Thanks so much.
Ian, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on again. All the best.
All right. Have a great Christmas and New Year.
You as well.
All right. Thanks.